Welcome back to the Godly Young Men podcast. This is episode 67. We are super excited that you are joining us for this episode. It's going to be a very enjoyable episode. These types of episodes are fun for us. We're doing kind of like a top 10 countdown, not necessarily countdown, but list kind of thing, where we are talking about, essentially, as you see in the title, don't be that guy. I think all of us have certain people that we know maybe, or certain maybe guys that you come across where you're just like, I don't ever want to be that guy. So we thought for this episode it'd be kind of fun to kind of put a list down specifically of what guy are we talking about when we say don't be that guy. And so much about what we've talked about in this podcast, 66 episodes in of the Godly Young Men podcast, is about striving for something, chasing after something. Not so much running away from things, but more so running towards something. Joe's talked about that a lot. I certainly agree with that. So, this episode might be a little bit different because we are going to be in this episode talking about, hey, don't be like these types of guys. Like, run away from these things. Run towards other things, but run away from these things. Joe, anything to add to the introduction of this one?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's just certain characteristics we want to avoid as men of God, but just as men in general. I mean, again, this is more kind of, I don't know if it's an indulgent episode. It's not as spiritually enriching maybe as some of the other ones because it's not a spiritual matter per se, but it is one of those that,
I was just going to say, it's going to enrich your life with your friends, with your
Correct.
family. Like, a lot of these are just social awareness things that we just feel like, don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't be that guy. So let's get into it. The first one is, and there's the great meme on the internet, actually, don't be actually guy.
Actually.
And what we mean by this is, we all got the buddy or the one person that, in 1822, such and such happened, you just read a cool book. Actually, it was 1823. No, don't be that guy. Don't be the actually guy who comes in with the one snippet of information, or actually that's not how that's pronounced. Nobody wants that to be that guy, and nobody wants to be the friend of that guy because you can't say anything without feeling like you're going to get corrected.
Yeah, I would just say on this one, there's such a self-awareness you have to know, like, even if you are correct, I'm correct about this is not the time and place to bring that up. This guy's telling a cool story or, sharing something about some museum he visited or watched this football game or whatever it is. I mean, this could apply to anything. For you to step in and jump in and say, well, actually, what guys do or what guys are trying to do when they do that is basically assert themselves as more knowledgeable, assert themselves as kind of the center of attention in a way of like, actually, I'm more intelligent than this person because I know this. It's just not the time and place. Don't be that guy.
And it's there's a friction to it, right? Like, you're not easy flowing at that point. Everybody likes the guy who's very easy flowing, and I'll add to the conversation and say this and say that. And it's like we go and
That's a good point.
Hit the brakes, and then we go again. So Mr. Fact Check over here, right? And Mr. Actually guy can get it right. Nobody wants that. And to your point, I think there's times where if somebody's way off on something like big, you may go, okay, hold on, that was the Apostle Paul.
I was going to say, especially in like a biblical discussion.
That wasn't Gandhi. Yeah. You want to correct a few major errors.
Jesus actually didn't say that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Something like that. Like, there's a difference between that of letting in untruth. Jesus said that, cleanliness is next to godliness. Like, he didn't actually say it, right? But at the same time, the principle's there. So you can still play along with some of the, whatever it is, not that the principle's there with Jesus, but that concept you can still play along with without being Mr. Actually guy. But just be aware of yourself in this one.
Yeah, and I would say this ties into the next one very much so. Yep. But the second type of guy of don't be that guy is Mr. Know-It-All. These two are obviously very related, but the actually guy kind of steps into conversations and, again, corrects people, whereas Mr. Know-It-All is just the guy that he truly acts as if he is the number one source of information on every single topic ever. Again, I'm sure a lot of you have had conversations with people like this. Maybe you've been in a room with people like this, went to school, whatever it is, where it's just the guy is so obnoxious because you can tell he actually thinks he knows more than everybody else on every other subject. Like, he's not even trying to hide it, whereas maybe the actually guy could maybe come across in a little bit better way. The Mr. Know-It-All guy is the guy who, once again, you can tell he firmly believes he knows more about every single subject than everybody else in the room. And odds are he probably doesn't. But that's exactly what he's trying to portray in a way.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I don't have like a ton to add to it other than the know-it-all is one of the most annoying tropes that you can be, in my opinion. And I don't know why it's a personal thing against me. Like, a lot of these are annoying, but it just drives me nuts.
I was just going to say, there's certain personality types that are truly enjoyable to be around. That one probably ranks at the bottom of the list of people that are just enjoyable to be around. Again, all of you know of people who are enjoyable to be around. The know-it-all guy never is.
And you may genuinely know a lot about a specific subject, fantastic. That is great. How you go about it is all different. If you step in with this, like, I know everything, man, that never goes well. Like, everybody gets very sick of the guy. Even if you do know everything on the subject, nobody wants you to be around when you're the guy who knows everything there is to know about it. So
Right.
you want to blend in like, yo, yeah. This is something that I've actually been very interested in. Did you know such and such? And they go, wow, I didn't know that. Yeah. And kind of stick with that one. If you're like, boom, fact.
It's like an avalanche of information. Yeah.
Avalanche of information, or, you're controlling every conversation about all the things you know. No. And I'm actually going to make a command decision because I think the last one we have on the list goes better with this one, flows into it. If you're good with it,
Go for it, yeah.
Which is the Wheelhouse guy. Don't be the Wheelhouse guy. So we have don't be actually guy. Don't be Mr. Know-It-All. Third, don't be the Wheelhouse guy. And I think this goes hand in hand with it because, there are guys that go, well, I don't know everything. Yeah, but you find how to bring every conversation around to your wheelhouse where, okay, I don't know anything about this sporting event, but I know a lot about hunting. And so I'm going to pull it back. Did you know such and such? And it always comes back to hunting. It always comes back around to your wheelhouse. People get very sick of just being in your wheelhouse. They want to be able to discuss a lot of different things. If you don't know anything about a specific subject, that's okay. Be curious.
The other side of this one, because this was one that as we were trying to think of things to add to the list, I've come across guys like this before who, if it's not something that they're good at in their wheelhouse, as Joe's saying, they're just not going to do it. Not going to try it. Hey, we're getting together. We're going to go, for instance, play pickleball. You got a lot of guys, and this is the guy that I would encourage you to be, who's like, man, I've never really tried it, but man, it sounds like a blast. Everybody's going to be there. Let's go have some fun. Those are the guys that are enjoyable to be around versus the guy that's like, yeah, nope, I'm not really my thing, never done it. And a lot of that stems from they don't want to fail. They don't want to look stupid. I see this a lot with guys that don't want to play basketball or maybe don't want to play golf or whatever. There's certainly things I'm not good at either, but I hope I'm the type of guy that's like, I've never done that. I would love to go give it a try. Versus a guy that's like, I'm not going to be good at that. That's somebody else's. Like, I'm going to go there and not be the most talented person in the room. So I would rather not. I'll just back out. That's the wheelhouse guy to me.
That's such a good point because it's the same as I said. This lacks curiosity. It lacks adventurousness, right?
Yeah.
This adventurous spirit of getting out there and trying it no matter what.
Because you're going to be at a vulnerable state. You're going to look, less than everybody else. Most guys or a lot of guys, I should say, who are a wheelhouse guy are like, not for me.
We were talking off air about my brother recently. So shout out to Jack, and we're proud of him because Will and I do play golf. My dad's played golf with us before. Jack hasn't touched a golf
2013,
golf club.
He said.
Was
11 years ago, yeah.
Man, and he got out there. And actually, he hit some really good ones. He had one of the
shots
best drives
than
of
me.
the day. Seriously, he had one of the best drives of the day of all four of us. But you know what? He had some really rough holes as well. Good for him. He got out there. He hadn't done it in 11 years. He's playing with some guys that not that we're good, but like obviously.
The point is, it would have been very easy for him to be like, no, I'll just stay home on this one, guys. Y'all go.
It's
have
not
fun.
in my wheelhouse, right?
Yeah.
Very easily could have just stayed in his wheelhouse, and we would have missed out on a really good time together. So don't be the guy that misses out on good times because it's not in your wheelhouse. Guess the number 4.
Yeah, and great audible there. That was the last one on the list. It ties in well. So switching gears kind of into a different realm. The fourth, don't be that guy, is the tone police guy. The tone police guy. So we talked a lot about this on our other podcast, Think Deeper, a lot of church-related issues and things that we get very passionate about. But we haven't talked a ton about it on this podcast. The tone police guy is basically the guy who, anytime somebody comes out and says something that maybe is a little bombastic, maybe is a little bit harsh-sounding or, blunt, maybe direct, the tone police guy is the guy that comes in and is like, okay, now I don't necessarily disagree with what you said, but you shouldn't have said it that way. I don't really like your tone. People could take that the wrong way. And why that's, some people might be listening to that going, what's the problem with that? It very much reeks of somebody who does not want to say the hard truths. Somebody who does not want to say the tough things. Somebody who wants to kind of appease everybody. Look, sometimes people need to get their feelings hurt. Sometimes, truths need to be said whether or not it's going to offend somebody or not. And I think for the tone police, the way I would sum it up is the tone police guy is constantly wondering who's going to get offended, who just got offended,
right.
How can we salvage this situation? Listen, sometimes that's not the most important thing. But the tone police guy, again, that's his number one objective, is to make sure that nobody's ever offended. He polices everybody's tone. It's just not a good guy to be.
No, because in an equity and inclusion world, everybody wants to make sure that the lowest are lifted up and whatnot. Look, I'm all for helping the lowest when possible, but if you're always the guy that's cheering for the downtrodden and you're never willing to just say the biblical truth or whatever it is, because it might be really mean. Look, the homosexuals can say they're downtrodden in this world. Somebody needs to come out and say that's a sin and it's wrong, and they are destined for hell if they do not repent. That's a tough, harsh truth in this world. It has to be said, and the guy that comes along goes, but do you have to say it in that way? Yeah, I do, because they won't listen otherwise. There has to be a level of this, thus saith the Lord, and God doesn't always say it in the nicest way possible either. He's trying to communicate a truth. So the tone police guy who comes in, you can really cut out the knees and discourage the truth sayer, the guy who's willing to actually stand up and say something that nobody else is going to. You can discourage him if you're always being the tone police guy. And here's kind of the litmus test, I guess. How would you say it? How would you say it better?
Right.
Because if you have a critique and you go, you know what, but maybe if you said it this way, I think that might
That's
go
the
very
funny
well.
thing is I feel like most people who are the tone police who come out and say, hey, maybe I probably wouldn't have said it that way. If you ask them how would you say it, they probably don't have a clue.
Well, the point is they wouldn't say it.
Right.
Because they don't have the guts to say it. And so their whole point is they want to be the tone police. They want to hide behind it. But to your point, they don't know how they'd say it, meaning just shut up and don't say it at all. Well, that can't be the answer. That clearly is not the answer. So if they have a specific way, if you happen to know a guy who's just really like off the wall and he's very abrasive and how, okay, that's a different thing from what we're talking about. We're talking about the preacher who gets up and preaches a hard-hitting sermon and you go, yeah, but he could have been nicer. He could have been nicer. Don't be the tone police guy. Let truth stand and let people, if they're going to be offended by them, you don't always have to stand up for the small guy. There are times to let that happen. I'm not saying don't ever do it, but if you're always the guy who's kind of punching up, I guess, because you're always, helping with the downtrodden and punching those up above and the man and whatnot, don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. Next one we're going to get into, number 5, the one-up guy. We've talked about this on the podcast
Everybody
before.
knows who this guy
Everybody
is.
knows exactly what we are referring to when we say the one-up guy. You talk about, I shot this elk, which I guess is not a big thing around here. Shot this deer. 7 point, or some people would say 14, right? Well, one time...
That's nothing.
That's nothing. One time I saw this deer, he came, and then you tell the story for 30 minutes, right? He came over the ridge, and he was just this way. He was an 8 point. Come on, don't one-up me, man. Like, just be happy for the guy.
Let the guy tell his story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let the guy have fun. He just shot it. He's excited about it. Do not look to one-up every story that you ever heard. And, well, oh, man, that's nothing. One time I stayed up all night for a test, and, then I had to go to work the next day. And stop one-upping. Just be like, man, you stayed up to 4 a.m. for this test? That's pretty rough. Like, let him tell his story and own that and be okay with it. But to me, this speaks to such insecurity that you always have to rise above somebody.
I was going to say, there's a lack of self-awareness. There's also a lack of self-esteem with this, too. Because it doesn't even have to be the guy that's like, oh, that's nothing. Even if as soon as somebody's done telling their, like you said, story about the buck that they shot or the time that they scored 27 in a high school basketball game or whatever, even if they just immediately jump in and tell their version of the story or their version of their own story, that's still one-upping. Even if you're not like, well, that's nothing, listen to my story. Rarely do people do that, but I know adults who are like this. Literally, as soon as you get done sharing something about your week or whatever, well, here's what happened to me, and like, no offense, but I didn't ask what happened to you. It's a level of self-awareness that you have to know, like, if you carry on the conversation well enough, hopefully the person will ask you, anything like that ever happened to you? And then you can jump in and share your story or whatever it is. But don't be the guy that is constantly, again, looking for an area to insert yourself into the conversation where you can appear like you are the most important person in the room. It very much related to the actually guy.
There's an art to this because it is okay to tie in similar experiences. You have to be very conscious of not being one-up guy, right? So, I've traveled. I've had the fortune of traveling. You've had the fortune of traveling. When somebody travels to a different country, my first inclination is like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I traveled to that country. I wonder what they thought of it, right? But there's a curiosity there. I have to be very careful that I don't one up them and be like, oh, well, did you see this? And we went here, and did you do this? No, let them tell their story. But you can also say, yeah, I went there. Did you have an opportunity to see this?
Ask questions. That's what I was going to say.
Exactly. Yeah. Ask questions. Did you have an opportunity to see this?
What'd you think of this? Yeah.
And then if they say, yeah, I did, man, what'd you think of it? And I've asked questions. Matter of fact, I've gotten so enthralled in getting their story, they didn't even know I went to the country. Because it wasn't about me in that moment. But it is about that connection sometimes of, wow, I am very interested. They went to Italy or whatever, and I've been to Italy, and I wonder if they had this same experience. And so asking questions is a great way to figure out where they are on it. Once you've asked enough questions, then you can offer something and be like, well, yeah, I went there one time, and this would happen. Keep it short and concise, but at least they know that you're invested in what they had to say.
And let me just say this. it is not the end of the world if they leave the conversation never knowing you went to that country.
Right.
Like, I think
That's
a lot of this is, especially with us as guys, because a lot of guys are constantly wanting their ego built up. They want to feel more secure about themselves. They want to feel important. So that they just have to let the person know that they also have been to that place, or they also, I'm just trying to think of a lot of these, they also can bench press this amount or whatever it is. And like, I think what we're getting at with a lot of this stuff is be content to not just put that information out there, to let them have their moment, and for you to not have to have your moment. I think that's really what you're talking about here, of like, ask questions, really get invested in what they're saying. And if they walk away and they never knew that you also went to that place in 40 other states as well, it's okay. It's not the end of the world.
Well, get us to number 6, because this is one you added to the list, and I think it does kind of wrap into this a little bit.
Yeah, kind of the Mr. Look at Me guy. The guy who very much wants to be the center of attention. This can be done in conversation, but also just in general goofiness. I think a lot of times you see this in, youth group classes that I've, personally, that I've taught before, where I can tell, like, okay, that's the look at me guy. He wants everybody to look at them, look at him. Always, I don't want to tread too much on the next one here, but always trying to say something funny that's going to get everybody's attention. He's just very much a, look at me, look at what I have done, look at my experiences. There's so many of these that are very related, but they're separate in and of themselves. The look at me guy is the guy that, once again, is just very low on the list of people that are enjoyable to be around. Because at the end of the day, once again, nobody wants to be around somebody who is just constantly bidding for attention, constantly throwing stuff out there, saying stuff, doing stuff. You can tell that they want it for attention, and that's just not enjoyable to be around.
We've talked about, of course, we haven't, but we've talked off air, and a lot of people talk about the alpha and the beta and the gamma and the sigma, right? The sigma male is what everybody wants to be, or allegedly, I suppose. And we've been asked to do, we might get into that one if anybody's familiar with what that is. But I was thinking about this with the look at me guy. One of the most attractive things that I think I was about to say that I've seen with females, but not in that way. But observing is a guy who does have all eyes kind of draw to him. They talk about, like, Bill Clinton used to have this. You walk into a room and somehow everybody just knew where he was. To have that, and to be a guy who doesn't have the look at me mentality.
That's a great point.
Where everybody wants to know him, everybody is looking at him, and he's just kind of, I'm content to
There's
be
a lack of desperation there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, that guy's confident. That guy knows what he's about. He can go in the corner and just talk one-on-one with somebody, or he can be in a group and not have to say a word, and yet everybody's attracted to this guy. That's what everybody's kind of shooting for. You can be that as long as you're not Mr. Look at Me, because that guy doesn't need everybody to look at him, but everybody already is looking at him, right? And he's aware of that, and he's conscious enough to know, time to be humble. This is not time for me to shine and to get out there and look at me and tell all these stories and everything else. And it goes right into this next one, number 7, which is the comedian. And the guy who steps into every situation telling a joke. He walks into a group of 5 people, and he's got to be the funny one, and everybody's got to be laughing at, and a lot of times they are overweight, and one of the reasons is they'd rather have people laughing with them than laughing at them. And it's a very sad thing. It's a very psychological thing internally. But a lot of the times when with a comedian, it's somebody who doesn't feel confident enough on their own, and so they always have to make a joke of everything. Or even in a one-on-one situation, they're always trying to figure out how to get a little quip, or, hey, I love a good pun. But when you're trying to find a pun and everything, and you can't take anything seriously, you need a friend who you can go to and go, man, I'm really struggling with this sin, or I've had the worst week and this is what's going on. And for him to not make light of it because he's too busy trying to be the comedian. Don't be that guy.
Yeah, I would say sometimes the jokes are ill-timed, or maybe you're having a serious conversation and he still wants to jump in with a joke. It's like everybody loves a good sense of humor, but I think everybody loves a good sense of humor timed well.
Correct.
The time it was like, man, that was really funny. Your timing was great. It was the perfect moment. There's, once again, as with all of these, just a level of self-awareness. Like, you don't always have to be the funniest person in the room. In fact, if you're the funniest person in the room, everywhere you go, that is probably a problem. So I don't have a ton to add to that. Yep. Trying to be the comedian is not always a great thing. Number, what are we on? 8? Number 8.
I think 8, yep.
Of don't be that guy would be the tryhard. This was a big term when I was a teenager. Of like, oh man, this guy's a tryhard. And this is, I think, a term that has kind of stuck around.
Yeah.
Like, it's not one of those, like, Riz is the big thing right now. That'll probably fade out in 5 years. Nobody will be saying Riz.
Glizzies.
I don't think oh, that's right. There's that one. There's Cap and just things like that you're probably going to fade away. Tryhard as a term, as a label for somebody, has kind of stuck around, and because there are a lot of guys who are like this, that they, with the way that they dress, with the way that they carry themselves, once again in conversations, or a lot of times that you see this like on the basketball court, or, playing sports, of like, you can just tell they want everybody else to be impressed by them. And so they're just trying so hard. And you see it also like on their social media with the things that they post. I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Again, I think most people kind of know what I'm talking about when I say the tryhard. But the guy who's just trying super hard to be liked. The guy who's trying super hard to be admired and be impressed. Versus what Joe just described of the guy who is just kind of walking in the room, doing his own thing, and people are naturally impressed by him. There's like a superficial level of admiration and impression, or being impressed for the tryhard guy, because he's trying too hard, versus the guy who just, again, naturally walks in and everybody's impressed by him. Everybody admires him. It's more natural as opposed to this tryhard guy.
And with a tryhard, once he gets everybody to like him, or once he gets everybody impressed, then what? He's got to try even harder. Now he's got to do something again. He's got to do something even more, or whatever it is. And so he's always chasing this affirmation instead of just resting in, I know who I am and I don't need to try that hard, because ultimately it doesn't really matter what people think. He clearly is the person that very much cares what people think, and so he has to try hard. He wants to look the part. His hair is always perfect, or his clothes are always great, or he's always got the right thing to say. I mean, it's the guy who spends hours in his room looking at himself in the mirror trying to figure out how he's going to get people to like him. You're trying too hard. But ultimately it comes back to, I need them to think well of. No, you don't. You don't.
We did an episode, I forget what we called it. Earning Your Place in the World. That's what it was. Of the guys who get into conversations with people who are just a little bit higher level than them, and they just, puff out their chest and kind of act like they're big stuff too. I think about that a lot with this one, of being a tryhard, of like, talking about what you did athletically and why you're so good at this and that, kind of in a braggadocious way. That also would fall into this category, I would say, of being a tryhard. It's like, just stop trying so hard. Especially, again, from a sports analogy, like, let your play do the talking. You don't have to do the talking. Don't try too hard in that way. Let your play do the talking. So, Joe, get us into number 9. We got 2 more.
Yeah, number 9 is the fisherman. Right, he's fishing for compliments. He's always going out of his way of
trying to be built up.
Yeah, trying to be built. I'm just no good at that. And no, dude, you really are. You really are. We've spoken to this. We're trying to figure out what podcast. We know we've spoken to this before. We could not remember.
I think it was in one of the ones that we did about respecting women or trying to find a godly wife. Something to do with girls.
Yeah, there you go.
Guys
that
do
sounds
this with
right.
girls a lot.
How to talk to girls, maybe?
Maybe that one, yeah.
Maybe that one of those. Either way, this is very much done with girls. But this is also done with guys, where you're always the guy who's fishing for the compliment. Putting himself down because you really want the pat on the back of, no, you really are good at this. Or don't be that guy. Don't be the guy who's always fishing for some sort of compliment, who's always trying to figure out how he's going to get. Because to me, that's so superficial. Like, nobody wants to give you that compliment. Nobody wants to tell you, but they also don't want to let it linger of like, oh, I'm just terrible at that.
Because then it's awkward.
And then it's kind of like, yeah, you are. Like, nobody wants to be like, no, you're not. Well, man, my jokes just aren't any good. No, they're funny. Come on. Nobody wants to have to be the guy praising that, and nobody needs to be the guy that's seeking that. So don't be the fisher.
I think I said this on the last episode we discussed it, and whenever people do this to me, I purposely don't say anything. It's like, because I know that's what you're wanting. I'm not going to do that.
You're fishing for it. Yeah,
I'm not going to bite as the fish that's on the hook here. I'm not going to bite at the bait. But yeah, don't be the compliment fisher. I don't have much to add. Let's go to the last one, number 10, and this is one that I added. Don't be the pessimist. Don't be the guy who's always like, no, I don't really think we can do that, or no, I really don't think so. Yeah. No, I don't really want to do that. Just a guy who is always saying no, always saying I don't think so, always saying no, we can't really do that. This is one of those people that's just not enjoyable to be around. I would much rather be around somebody who is optimistic, who's going to try things, who's like, man, I don't know if it'll work out, but sure, let's give it a shot. They're more joyful naturally, they're more enthusiastic, as opposed to the pessimist guy who, again, it's just a drag to be around, because he's always talking about negative things. He's always maybe downing himself, downing other people. That's just, again, not somebody that is enjoyable to be around. Don't be the pessimist.
Yeah, no, the doom and gloom, right? Yeah. Everything's going to go wrong. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. He kind of lives his life in that way. I mean,
the Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, exactly. And you do see this. You do have friends that's like, man, they just can't catch a break. And it's because everything in their life is perceived as negative. Everything in their life has gone wrong, and so they're just very pessimistic in that way. You don't have to be Mr. Positivity either. I mean, from the flip side, you could also, we don't have that on here, but like, don't be Mr. Positivity where everything's great and,
all the time.
And I was just diagnosed with cancer, but no, that's a very serious thing. There are times to go, I'm really sorry. Wow, that is incredibly, incredibly heavy. You don't always need to come in with this boost of positivity and this boost of energy. It's okay sometimes to weep with those who weep and to laugh with those who laugh, and to notice the times of like, that's a serious thing. Let's pump the brakes for this for a second and recognize it. But on the other hand, the pessimist who's like, well, I just got a raise, but it was only for $2 an hour, and I really thought it was going to be $5 an hour. And it's like, my goodness, can we look at anything through a positive lens?
I don't have exact statistics or exact resource to back this up, but I've seen and read studies where the most successful people in life generally are more optimistic.
Yeah.
They're not looking at life through a negative lens. They're not looking at life through a pessimistic lens. Successful people, it's one of those like luck is the residue of design, like fortune favors the bold. Those who are more optimistic, those who are more risk-taking in a way, they are going to end up having better luck. Because
you're more inclined to see opportunity.
Yeah, and in a way, they're manifesting it kind of because they're believing in themselves versus, nah, I really don't think I can do it. Well, then, yeah, you're probably not going to get a good score on the ACT if that's your mindset or whatever the challenge is in front of you. Don't be Mr. Pessimism. Joe, we could have probably put a lot more on the list. We tried to be as exhaustive as possible, and I know a lot of them blended together, but hopefully you're getting a picture, or you got a picture as we look to wrap this episode, of just the general characteristics of guys that are just not that enjoyable to be around. And again, as Joe said to start the episode, this is not the most spiritual episode in the world, but it is an episode where we want you as godly young men to be good conversationalists.
Yep.
We want people to enjoy sitting down and having coffee or having dinner with you. We want you to be able to talk to a girl and not have any of these problems. Right. We want you to be able to carry yourself in such a way. I mean, people that have these traits and these characteristics in the corporate world, they don't do very well.
Right.
Because, again, they're very self-absorbed. They're not self-aware. They can't really engage in good conversation. And so if you're listening to this right now going, man, I think I do some of that. Maybe that's, first of all, it's great that you're recognizing it. But second of all, we're bringing this out so hopefully you can move past that. Hopefully you can move away from that.
And I would actually, I like how you said that. I would actually challenge you. Which one is the hardest for you?
Yeah.
As I look at all of this, looking at what might be hardest for me, I think sometimes I can be the pessimist guy, and sometimes I can be the wheelhouse guy from time to time, where I just want to do things in my wheelhouse. So I want to be able to recognize as we're looking through, and maybe you have more to add to this. Maybe this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but maybe you have, they should have said this one, that one. First off, comment, let us know. Subscribe on YouTube, like and subscribe.
Like, rate, review.
There you go. But make sure to comment on if you have another one that you would like to add, but be introspective. Which one do you think is the hardest one for you in this? Because I'm already looking at this list kind of knowing. So I'm going to go over the list one more time, and we might have it up on screen. I'll have Will do the graphics for this and put it up on screen. The actually guy, don't be the actually guy, Mr. Know-It-All. The wheelhouse guy, tone police guy, one-up guy, Mr. Look at Me, the comedian, the tryhard, the fisherman, and the pessimist. Again, not an exhaustive list, but which one are you most prone to? Because this might create a little bit of self-awareness in us. Oh, I don't do any of those. Chances are we all gravitate toward one or two or maybe even three of those from time to time. So just which one do you gravitate toward? I know mine of what's easiest for me to fall into. But yeah, that would be my challenge for the gym followers.
I don't have much to add. We'll wrap right there. This has been episode 67 of the Godly Young Men podcast. We thank you for listening. We thank you for watching. If you're on YouTube, we will be back next week.